We'll go from there. Halifax, huh?
Halifax, Nova Scotia. So I'm like 3 hours from Halifax.
I have a friend of mine, one of my closest friends, who just spent a vacation there with his wife. He said it was incredible.
Well, that's good. Good old
Yeah.
Nova Scotia hospitality, I guess. We always offer good stuff down there.
He said it was one of the best times he ever had in his life.
Nice. So, David, you've got an interesting life and story you're telling in your book. And from what I've seen, like it's over 200 pages. This must have been a mission and a half to accomplish just writing it.
It was almost overwhelming. I didn't realize what it entailed. Actually, writing a book, I'm glad that I did it. I think I would ponder the issue if I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now. But I'm really happy that I did write it.
When you even start writing a book, where do you go in like in your head to get all the timelines and stuff like that? Because I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
You have to create a process, I suppose. At least that's what I did. I had people over the last several years say, Dave, you should write a book. And I never really gave it really serious thought until about 3 years ago. My girlfriend said, yeah, you should write a book. And I said, do you think I have a story to tell? She goes, you do. And so then I started thinking more seriously about it and created a process. If I remembered something, I'd write it down. If I how I felt about a certain thing, I'd write it down until I had many pages of thoughts and recollections. And then I started to put it together. And if I was thinking about something that had happened, that I had experienced, rather than try to write it properly, I I felt that a stream of consciousness was the best way to put something down on paper. You can always go back later and fix it grammatically or put it the way you want. So that's what I did. It was a process that I created for myself to write the book.
And David, with the title Rock and Roll Warrior, there's plenty of titles you could have picked. Where did this title come from for you to use this one?
I actually didn't have a title, and so I said, well, I'll call it Rock and Roll Warrior, and until I come up with a title, and then it sort of grew on me. It's not a bad title for the book. It's descriptive, I suppose, of my life in the music business. So it ended up being the working title to the permanent title.
Nice. Now there's a quote here, like it's not quoted perfectly from you, but it's like when you're joining Alice Cooper, for let's say the first week or something, you mark there's like no manual or job description, for this job. In your head at that moment, with the circus show and all that stuff going around, how wild was it, for you to, get everything in line?
Well, when I first got the job, Alice Cooper's manager, Shep Gordon, said, "Listen, just just observe what's going on," because I had absolutely no idea what my job was. I hadn't a clue. And he said, "Just observe, and you'll start to get the hang of it after a while." And my first impression on my first gig with Alice Cooper, which was at the Fox Theater in Atlanta, 1972, I think, was a bunch of wild, crazy looking people just crawling over all the gear and equipment like giant insects. And I said to myself, oh, what the hell did I get myself into? Uh, I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But by the end of the week, I started to get the hang of it, and everything sort of started to fall into place. And as crazy as these people look, they really knew what they were doing. They were very good at what they do. They may look insane and act kind of crazy, but they knew exactly what they were doing. And I could tell that they had a tremendous amount of respect for Alice and the rest of the band. And since Alice relied so heavily on effects and props, they wanted to make sure that everything worked properly. They didn't want to let the band down by something going wrong. So they did everything humanly possible to make sure that it didn't. And I became one of them after a couple of weeks, I'm happy to say. And it turned out to be not the worst mistake of my life, but probably one of the very best things that ever happened to me in my life.
David, let's say we go back into those eras, 1971, 72. Cameras are not, for filming, they're not, that easy to attain. When do you guys decide, or how did you get cameras to film certain shows? Or is it, well, the big cameras of Hollywood that you have? I don't know. Because there are certain shows that exist and certain that don't.
Well, in those days, in the early 70s, if you wanted to film a show, it was a huge undertaking because you're right, cameras were huge. And even if we did an arena in the early 70s, TV and video facilities simply didn't exist. Today, every arena, every show has all of that equipment. Every show is filmed, and that just didn't exist then. So the few shows that the Alice Cooper band filmed, a lot of arrangements had to be made in order to do that. There's a couple that come to mind. One of them is the O2 Arena in London. That was a film that was, that show was filmed. But that's why there really isn't a lot of film from the early 70s. The one exception may be the Rolling Stones. They filmed everything. Okay. That's why there's so much stuff that's available. But they just had cameras follow them around. And I don't think anybody else did that. Certainly Alice Cooper didn't.
And what, like that, if let's say it would have been filmed a lot more today, the memories would be even greater for certain shows, let's say, that we don't have access to ever see.
Yeah, it's now everything is filmed, isn't it? And everybody carries a camera.
Yeah.
It simply wasn't like that. And, my involvement in the music business goes all the way back to the mid-'60s when I was in a band called The Happenings. And we had a few hit records. There's virtually nothing filmed. The only remaining film that there is for The Happenings would be if we did a TV show and they made a kinescope of it, okay, which is what they called it. So there's a little bit of that. Of course, there's a lot more for Alice because he did a lot more TV. But yeah, filming and video was pretty sparse at that time. I mean, how many videos have you seen of the Doors? Hardly anything. It's just, people just didn't do that at that time.
Could it maybe be that when we listen to the audio recordings of these concerts like bootleg, it's kind of like reading a book. We're seeing it in our head. And are we going to have this for the rest of, eternity of music? And we'll just have our own envisions of what could have went to these shows? Kind of. I mean, it's like reading a book, let's say, listening to these bootlegs.
Yeah, it's funny. We didn't allow anybody to record the shows way back when. I mean, if we saw, and if recording in those days would be somebody with a little, I guess, a watchman. I'm not even sure they existed, or somebody clandestinely filming a show. We usually took the film away or sometimes took the camera away. Today, that's impossible. Everybody has a camera and everybody films the show. And I don't think anybody really minds anymore.
Yeah.
So big difference, it's the technology of a lot of things related to the music industry and basically the world itself. Look how ubiquitous a cell phone is with a camera. It's just amazing.
Yeah, there's some people who can even shoot the moon with a picture, and it looks good with a cell
Right.
phone. It's
We
incredible.
had to satisfy ourselves, and I think I put it in the book. Uh, we had Polaroid land cameras. Do you remember those things? We thought it was amazing because you could snap a picture, and it would spit out the camera would spit out the picture like a minute or two later. Of course, that's totally obsolete today. You can do that with your cell phone and preserve the picture. But then it was pretty amazing to us, and it satisfied a particular need that all rock and roll bands seem uh, to seek, and that is instant gratification.
Yeah. And David, you worked with Sheila E, and that opens the door to meeting Prince. And I read your section on Prince, and that's pretty interesting the way it's written, and how Prince was as a person. And did you ever even go in his studios much and see how he worked in there, or was it mostly just like the rooms and stuff, like the hotels you're talking about?
Yeah, the hotels. I never was in the studio with him. Um, but I spent some time in Minneapolis where he had his complex. And one of the things I didn't put in the book, I guess there's a few things that in retrospect I should have, or recalled the whole thing afterwards. Um, he had rehearsal halls, he had studios, he had this whole thing, but he also, I don't know how many people know this, he had a clothing factory. He had a bunch of people that made clothes for him. He didn't wear stuff off the rack. He didn't go into a store to buy clothes. He had people that made clothes for him, and they also, of course, made clothes for Sheila and people in his band. And I thought that was rather interesting, and just another path of creativity for Prince, who was just amazingly talented and certainly a very interesting guy. I liked him. He was very nice to me. I think that, and he wasn't all that nice to everybody else. He could be pretty brutal as a boss to
Right.
the people, band and management and record company. But he was nice to me, and my guess is that I was older than most of the people in his inner circle, and he knew of my association with Alice Cooper, and certainly my association with George Clinton, someone that he absolutely idolized. So I guess he just didn't want to come off looking like a jerk to me. I think it's amazing that he even cared what I thought about him.
Right. And
He,
like you're
he,
describing that he goes and invite you to watch the videos, of his previous performance, in the room. That's pretty special, I would say.
it was. It gave me insight into how he thought, how he worked, and I guess that was his form of socialization and entertainment. He enjoyed it. Maybe there'd be 8 or 10 people in the room with him, and he would watch the video of the show from earlier that evening, and he would make comments. Oh, I'm not going to do that again, or that's kind of cool. It's funny. I can't say. I don't think anybody can say that Prince was a lot of fun. I wouldn't call him a fun guy. Alice Cooper was a fun guy. He liked to have a good time. I think having a good time was sort of the last thing on Prince's mind. He was just too focused on what he was doing. And I suppose his form of fun was hanging out with a few people he was, close to, and watched the video. So the first night I was invited to the room, I felt kind of honored. I really didn't know Prince very well. Sheila called me up and said, Prince would like you to join us in his suite to watch the video. Wow, I felt kind of special. And then the next night, Sheila called and said, Prince would like you to come down to the room again. And I'm saying to myself, am I going to be obligated to do this every night? I wasn't so thrilled the second night. The third night, when she called, I told her I wasn't going to make it. 5 minutes later, Prince calls, come on down, Dave, join the party. Like it was really going to be a big time fun thing.
Right.
And after that, I knew never to answer my phone at night. I would just pretend I'm asleep because, it was infringing on my downtime, of which there isn't a lot of if you're on a tour.
Right.
So he never called again, but he let it be known that I was welcome to come anytime I wanted. And I did once in a while, just not that often. But I was happy that I had that standing invitation.
How late would these little semi parties last, like to watch your videos? Was it like an all-nighter, or was it like just a couple hours and that's it?
Couple of hours, two. Well, the show would end at 11. We'd go to his room 12 or 12:30, be there for a couple of hours. So I guess it's kind of broke up around 2, 3 in the morning. I guess that was roughly how it worked.
You must be tired after a while. You would imagine doing that every night, like staying up.
Me or him?
You and him.
Well, I can't speak for me, but yeah, it was. But his shows were so exhilarating. Everybody was sort of on an up, on a high, just from the show itself. So it took a few hours just to come down, really, to be able to go to sleep. It was very stimulating. It was fun.
And going on those videos, you're watching the same production of that evening on film that's already edited. So who was doing this work? Does he bring a film crew with him every night?
No, it wasn't. It was a single camera.
Okay.
Pointed to the center of the stage, mostly. You could, and maybe somebody moved it a little bit here and there on occasion, but it was there strictly for him to watch it. So it was mostly on him. Maybe there was a camera person that followed him. I really can't remember, but it wasn't a big production.
Okay.
It was just a camera out by the sound booth in the audience. And perhaps there was somebody that followed him around, but I really can't remember.
Going on a legendary moment for Alice Cooper, let's say. Alice Cooper and Colonel Sanders, were you around when this legendary meeting took place?
No, it's funny. I didn't even know about it. And in an interview a few days ago, somebody brought that up. I had no idea that took place, or I even questioned the validity of it all. But apparently it did happen. I wasn't there. I'm not sure why I wasn't. Maybe it was after my time, or I was just doing something else. There were moments that not many when Alice would be handled by somebody else to take him somewhere. That was rare, but sometimes I was just involved doing something else and I couldn't go. So I had a couple of assistants on the road. Maybe that's what happened on that Colonel Sanders thing.
Maybe. And like you're mentioning in your book, the royalties for the happenings and all that stuff at the end towards the book, how difficult was it, with the Sirius XMs and the Spotify's and that in your life, let's say, like just to take a take on it? Because it's everything seems nobody's buying CDs, nobody's downloading music anymore. It's all streaming, and like you mentioned, it is Apple Music. You pay a fee, and it's little minuscule amounts of money.
Right, and I really can't blame people today. I mean, for $10 a month, you can subscribe to Apple Music or Amazon Music, and ask Siri or Alexa to play virtually any song that's ever been recorded, any song, any album, any genre, any band. Why would somebody go out and buy a CD under those circumstances? I can't really blame them. But yeah, it really did affect my bottom line. it went from earning a decent living because I had royalties coming in to practically nothing coming in terms of royalties. And then Sirius XM, Pandora, and some of these other music delivery systems decided legally they didn't have to pay the artist for anything that was recorded prior to 1972, which was everything that the Happenings did.
Mm-hmm.
They interpreted the law, federal law, that they really didn't have to pay us, and I didn't think there was anything that anybody could do about it, except there were two guys that did decide to do something about it. Mark Volman and Howard Kalin, Flo and Eddie, the ex-Turtles,
Okay.
filed a lawsuit against Sirius XM, Pandora, and others for failure to pay. And in the end, they won. And between Pandora and Sirius XM, just those two alone, there was a settlement payment of over $300 million and maybe another 25, 30 million afterwards that they were obligated to pay. And all of a sudden, they were so influential that they actually got Congress here in the United States to pass a law requiring everybody to pay a fair amount of money for streaming. And now my royalties are more than they've ever been.
That's good.
Yeah, I'll say.
It's something that has to continue, because if you wouldn't have that, how would you encourage a youth of today to end up being a musician if there is no money to be made? So it's a wild world out there.
Well, in the 70s, the motivation, you wanted to be famous and rich, besides loving music and being in a band and enjoying that whole lifestyle. Today, you better like music. You better enjoy playing music, because the chances of you becoming rich and famous are pretty slim. I mean, the odds weren't very good when I was in a band. If it was 1,000 to 1 to be in a successful band when I was in the Happenings, it's 1,000,000 to 1 today. Sure, there's more opportunity for your music to be heard, but it's so diluted over the internet that you better have a wonderful love for music and hope you can eke out an existence playing music, because it's pretty tough now. You got to sell merchandise and CDs at your shows and really work the whole social media thing. It's like a full-time job.
It is. I mean, when you're looking at the social media aspect of it, you're not practicing music anymore. You're typing on the internet. You're promoting yourself in some way, so you're not practicing your art. So it's different.
Yeah, it's completely different. The motivation is completely different as well. I enjoyed being in the music business during the golden age, I call it. I was in a band in the late 60s, and I worked for people like Alice Cooper and Parliament Funkadelic throughout the 70s. And then things started to change, I guess, in the late 80s, early 90s. I was still doing well. I had bands like A Living Color, a great band, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And but it was all changing. Technology is constantly changing the world, and it has a tremendous effect on music. I mean, think about it. First, it was 78 RPMs, and then somebody invented the 45, and then the LP came into existence, and then that was all replaced by 8-tracks, cassettes.
Yeah.
That was all replaced by CDs, and that was all replaced to a certain extent by downloads. digital downloads, they don't even exist anymore. So technology has had a tremendous effect on the music business as well, I suppose, as it has on most industries, but especially the music industry.
Mhm. David, to finish off, how many gold records you got there in the back of you? And what is that great stuff we see? It's like very nice.
Well, thank you. I hope I don't have to smelt it all down someday, Jason. But assuming I don't, back there we have, let's see, that one right there. Let me see, is actually Guns N' Roses, and I have a story about them in my book. And the rest are Alice Cooper, Bootsy Collins, The Happenings, the band that I was in originally. That's these two over here. And Vanilla Fudge, Living Color, Funkadelic, Parliament. Who am I missing? I think that takes care of most of them. I have a couple of dozen. I think I have 23 or 24 altogether.
That's nice.
So, yeah. So, and now what are they going to do today? They don't give out gold and platinum records, which was the accolade, which was the award that gave you recognition. Now what do they give you? I don't know. Nothing.
Maybe a YouTube trophy or something like that. I don't know. It's
I don't know. I'll look into it. I'll look into it and get back to you, Jason.
Yeah, well, it's like that. It's very nice talking to you, David, and like your book, very well structured, and it's very, very well, very readable too, I should say.
Well, I appreciate that. I tried to make it sound like me, actually. I wanted it to have a certain flow. I didn't want it to be this salacious tell-all, sex balls and tits flying all over the place. There's a little bit of that in the book. Pretty hard to not have a little bit of that in it. It's rock and roll we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I wanted it to be more introspective, and I wanted it to be more informative, and I wanted it to be fun, and I wanted it to be funny. And I'd like to think that I did it. I achieved those goals.
You certainly did, and like people that do want to read it, to get more knowledge about, being tour manager and stuff, and how you saw it, it's great. I think it's very well done. So,
well,
yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Well, David, you have a good evening, and I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm going to keep on reading your book.
Thank you, Jason. It was my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.